Hello again, my subscribers. Today we are doing a Let's Read. Well, this is it.
Here it is, the moment you've been waiting for. Here it is, you know exactly what's in store.
I've been building up to this moment, and now we're getting into it.
What's happening?
My fan fiction that acts as a sequel to My Immortal. Some of the characters you will recognize, and others you will not. I've already said one of them will not be read, because I don't want to give this guy any more attention than he deserves. But I will link some Let's Reads of his books. This way, it'll make a little more sense once we get there.
And so, without further gilding the lily, and with no more ado,
Let's read the trio of impractically perfect characters. The fires of hell raged, bringing forth horned imps and scaly demons with bifurcated tails to torture any damned soul who earned a place here, and business was booming. These unfortunates included the usually suspected crowd: the psychopathic and murderous political leader, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Kim Jong-il, Saddam Hussein, Muammar al-Gaddafi, and Benito Mussolini; the sociopathic and predatory cult leader, Jim Jones, Charles Manson, Joseph Smith, L. Ron Hubbard, David Koresh, Marshall Applewhite, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and Osama bin Laden; the serial killer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Albert Fish, Andre Chikatilo, and Jeffrey Dahmer; the complacent leader who cared only for his image rather than those who were wronged, Cardinal Bernard Law and William S. Skylstad, and so on. A few no-names were included in the lot, like the abusive father, the embezzling bank manager, the tax-evading con artist, or the pedophile from next door in a neighborhood occupied mainly by Mormons or Catholics. Hell didn't discriminate when it came to evildoers, but it had its own rules of who qualified and who didn't. All religious people who believed in a place of evil where the wicked are punished would be disappointed to see who landed here and who didn't. Often, as a surprise, they began their afterlives with red-hot pitchforks shoved up their orifices and constant reminders of why they earned their places in hell: killing the gay kid, assaulting the trans person in a public bathroom without seeing the irony of their prejudices regarding that particular scenario, and wiping out an entire civilization because they didn't believe in the same invisible man in the sky in which they believed. By the way, if any of this sounds like a hidden agenda within what should be an enjoyable albeit ridiculous story, then tough titty. When you go around committing any of these awful acts against the human race, then, to quote Arthur Fleck,
get what you fucking deserve!
But there was one person here, not because she did any of this, although some of her behaviors cross over into these crimes. Oh no, her place in hell was earned because she did nothing but cause misery, anger, and controversy for the people around her. Her name was cause for eye-rolling and bad memories for those who had the misfortune of being acquainted with her. Her name was Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway. At least, that was what she called herself. No one knew what her real name was, nor did they understand why the apostrophe had to be in the word darkness, let alone placed explicitly between the K and N. Every time that question was asked of her by her fellow students or teachers, she yelled or gave them a rather rude gesture. That was one of her many reasons why people so reviled her. A part of being in hell was repeatedly experiencing one's worst fear or moment in life. Each person has their own: death, loss of a loved one, or disfigurement, to name a few. There was no shortage of items for this type of torture. For Ebony, The suffering was wearing a bright pink polo shirt with a seagull stitched into the fabric, a denim miniskirt that looked destroyed, and leggings with a small moose sewn into the hem. A pretty bag with an eagle was draped over her shoulder with the words, "Live your life," sewn in every inch. Prep clothing, a big no-no in Ebony's book. She repeatedly ripped off the polo, only to find another of the same kind underneath. This is what she experienced for thousands of years. "I fucking hate prep clothing!" she screamed. Ebony always considered herself Gothic, or, as she often pronounced it, Gothic, and therefore detested and despised what she viewed as prep clothing, clothes worn by people who didn't partake in the Gothic lifestyle. Her style of speech was odd. The way she pronounced words made them sound not quite right. She spoke just like she wrote, full of typographical errors and unnecessary parentheticals, where she had to remind people that she was both Gothic and a Satanist. Mostly that idiosyncrasy, or annoyance to some, was because of some foolish joke she made that nobody laughed at because it simply wasn't funny. She also believed that she was a vampire, and all vampires had to wear the same type of Gothic clothing. She thought this was one reason humans didn't understand her. How could they? They were humans, and she was a vampire, even though vampires didn't exist. But she was in hell now, and this was what she had to suffer for all eternity, her and her ever-growing pile of pink polo shirts. Back on Earth, Los Angeles, California's citizens ran away from a battle seeking protection from the onslaught. But they knew they wouldn't be safe for very long. Yes, they encountered worse: earthquakes, Proposition 8, the 2016 election, and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but this was unlike anything they'd ever before seen. The two titans stood before each other in a Mexican standoff. Both trained their Desert Eagles on each other. The odd thing about these titans was that they didn't resemble the ones typically found in Greek mythology, unless the Greeks hid something so the Romans couldn't steal it. Instead, they echoed a dog and cat. Their bodies, however, resembled a man's. More specifically, bodybuilders. "It's over, Garfield," announced the dog. He was covered in yellow fur, and his ears were long and brown. He wore an eye patch, and his left arm was cybernetic. Sparkling metal spikes decorated his shoulders. An evil cape trailed from his back. His one good eye looked like it had either a plan or no plan. "No, Odie," said the cat named Garfield coolly. "It's over when you're singing to the fat lady with bullets in your body." Garfield was an orange tabby who usually had a laid-back look in his eyes. He was shirtless because his muscles were too big for any size shirt. At least, that's what he told himself. But he always wore pants and combat boots. Now, they scowled at the assailant. He also had an odd habit of giving a fist bump with his right arm every time he said the word with. No one understood why. He never explained it. "You want to shoot me?" teased Odie. "I'd like to see you try. You're not man enough to shoot me." Calling to task his manliness was a way for Odie to get under Garfield's skin, and they both knew it. Still, it didn't stop the giant tabby from following through on a threat. "You want to be betting with gamblings?" said Garfield. He pulled the trigger on his Desert Eagle, and a bullet tore through Odie's chest. The dog fell to the ground in pain. Clutching his chest, Odie felt an extreme heat. It wasn't his flowing blood, nor the smoke of the bullet. He brought his hand to his eye line and found a mixture of his blood and tomato sauce, remnants of noodle sheets, ricotta cheese, and beef bits. He knew instantly what it was, and it annoyed him more than Garfield's idiosyncratic speech. "Lasagna bullets!" exclaimed Odie painfully and irritably. "Really? What the fuck is your obsession with lasagna?" Garfield had a love bordering on obsession with lasagna, and it had gotten on Odie's nerves for quite some time now. The cat included it in everything, including the flavor of his brand of cigarettes. The pack he pulled from his pocket, placed a stick between his lips, and lit it with the flame burning out of the barrel of the Desert Eagle. "It is truly greatest thing in world," said Garfield, taking a long drag and blowing it, next, of course, to sexy ladies with lovings on their minds. He holstered the Desert Eagle and held out his fist, thumb raised to the sky. A spaceship appeared out of thin air, and a beam shot out of its underside, hitting the ground. A hole opened under Odie, and before he could respond, he fell, screaming to the center of the earth. "Very good," said Garfield, nodding his head approvingly. He held his fist up to the sky again. The beam narrowed, and the hole closed. But a figure leapt out just before the closure was complete. Garfield had his hand on his Desert Eagle, ready to draw. But this was not his nemesis. The figure stood up and brushed herself off. She was dressed in a pink polo and a destroyed denim miniskirt. Her hair was black and reached her mid-back. The ends were red. She looked up at Garfield, who was shocked. "Is this Hogwarts?" asked Ebony. Ebony tore pink polos off her body, trying vainly to escape them when a hole opened from above. She looked up and saw a light she hadn't seen in 1,000 years. Hell time moved quicker than Earth time, so 20 years on Earth equaled 1,000 years in Hell. Therefore, any light that wasn't hellfire was a welcome change. But Ebony knew this light well. It was light from Earth. Home. A doorway back home. Immediately, she looked around for something allowing access to the hole, but found nothing. The sadness was so overbearing that she looked around for a sharp rock. It was common for her to slash her wrists when she couldn't take the stress of being away from what she wanted most. However, being in hell meant she would never be liberated by wrist slashing, and considering the number of times she had somehow been saved from bleeding to death, that wasn't saying much. Still, it was better than wearing prep clothing. Before she could complete the suicidal task, a figure dropped into the hole and bounced off the giant pile of pink polos to the hot ground. It looked like a massive dog with a muscular body. An odd sight indeed. But the Earth's light kept her attention, and she noticed a view she ignored until now. The polos reached the hole. "That's how I can get out of this fucking place," screamed Ebony. She ran to the pile and immediately started her climb, but her leg was caught. She looked down and saw the dog grabbing her leg, a crazed look in his eye. "Let go of me, you fucking freak!" screamed Ebony. One swift kick to the hand, and he let go. Tumbling down the pink hill, he cried, "I'll get you, Garfield!" called out the dog. "Whatever that means," said Ebony. She flipped him the bird, the rude gesture she gave everyone, and continued upward toward the light. And just before it closed, she landed on her face on the pavement. She stood up and brushed herself off. Nothing looked the same as it did when she was alive. Upon inspection, she saw everyone wearing tight clothing, thickly rimmed glasses, and the women wearing high-waisted jeans, shorts, and dresses. They all had a strange device in their hands that shone light into their faces. Their thumbs worked away at the screens at a quick pace. Ebony turned her attention away from the strange crowd and saw an orange cat with the same body type as the dog. Having attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Ebony was used to seeing all sorts of weird and unusual things. But she'd be lying if she said this was something old hat. Still, she ventured a guess. "Is this Hogwarts?" Ebony asked. "What nonsense are you blathering about with babblings, woman?" asked Garfield. It was his instinct to approach any woman within his sights immediately, but none of them uttered nonsensical words like Hogwarts. Although the name sounded familiar to him, he couldn't quite place it. Ebony saw the cigarette in his mouth and asked, "Do you have an extra cigarette on you?" "Always, with preparations," said Garfield. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket and handed it to her. She never smoked before. The worst thing she'd done health-wise was cut herself. But this was something she needed at the moment. She couldn't explain why. Do you have a light? Asked Ebony. Garfield withdrew his Desert Eagle and said, I always have a light both in my hand and in my pants to spare for sexy ladies. Don't shoot! Yelled Ebony, raising her hands. A bullet to the heart was her ticket to hell, and she did not want us to send her back. Never fear, Sugar Lips, said Garfield. It's not loaded. He cocked the gun, and a tiny flame appeared from the barrel, lighting Ebony's cigarette. She took a long drag, and just as she was getting ready to exhale, she spat out the smoke, coughing. While she had never tasted tobacco, she knew something about the addictive stick that didn't taste right, based on smelling others smoking tobacco. This tastes like a plate of spaghetti, sputtered Ebony. It is not spaghetti cigarette, said Garfield indignantly. It's lasagna cigarette. How could she not tell the difference between lasagna and spaghetti? Was she dense? Was she retarded? How could she launch forth such an insult? Who did she think she was? It was goddamn lasagna. Why do you have a lasagna-flavored cigarettes? Asked Ebony. It was weird that a humanoid cat would walk around in, what looked like anyway, the Muggle, non-magic, world. But lasagna-flavored cigarettes? Because lasagna with ladies is greatest thing in world, said Garfield in a matter-of-fact way. Why no one agreed with him was something of an unsolvable mystery. This is disgusting, said Ebony. No normal person smokes these. She threw the cigarette onto the ground and stomped it into the road. This was not a good gesture for anyone to give, and it was a sign of disrespect to the earth to dump trash everywhere. But usually a friendly reminder can set things right. For Garfield, however, this was heinous on every front he knew. The environment, especially lasagna. He had to teach her a lesson in decency. He walked up to her, raised his open hand, and brought it down across her face. Like a popper on the concrete sidewalk, a loud crack rang through the street. Everyone's attention turned to the quarrel. Having fallen to the ground, Ebony looked up at Garfield with shock. Littering is bad, bellowed Garfield. The world doesn't need any more sad Indians with teary eyes or dirty streets with garbage. But don't be bad-mouthing lasagna with slandering. Ebony stared up at Garfield. Her eyes widened in anger. Who the hell was this freak to hit her? She didn't know what he was or where he came from, but she didn't care. No one was allowed to lay a hand on her like that. Nobody. And if they did, they would regret it. She shot back onto her feet and ran to Garfield, fist already working on bruising him up. It hurt her hands because of his rock-hard abs, but she didn't care. Initially, Garfield was surprised. No other woman in his travels ever stood up to him like that. But an attack was an attack, and he grabbed her fists and lowered her arms to her sides. She tried to escape his grip, but he was too strong. Let me go, you fucking pussy! Screamed Ebony. Not until you calm down with relaxation, sugar tits, said Garfield. What did you call me? Screamed Ebony, further enraged. Sugar tits. I call all ladies nice names with terms of endearment. Oo think that's a nice name? Oo fucking dolt? Yes. Well, it's not. It's fucking misogynistic. And oo don't get to hit me. Noon does. Oo hear me? Noon. The spaceship from the fight landed before them. The engine shut off, and the walkway lowered from the bottom of the ship. Ebony and Garfield heard the roar of a motorcycle engine from inside the vessel. The noise grew louder, and a man on a Harley-Davidson came out, popping a wheelie as he stopped before the two fighters. He wore a dark green beanie, blue-gray long-sleeved denim shirt, a gray winter vest, and black fingerless gloves. Around his waist there were two belts. One of them had a phone in a holster. Strapped to both of his thighs were holsters for guns. A holster for a giant gun was strapped to his back. A circular beard surrounded his mouth. His brown eyes looked dead. Stop fighting, said the biker. Garfield. John Freeman and woman must get back onto the ship. There are many more missions for Garfield and John Freeman to have. Garfield and John Freeman must live up to family name and face full life consequences. You are being right with knowledge, my friend, said Garfield. They entered the ship. with a biker popping a wheelie along the way. The spaceship served its inhabitants on many adventures, and along the way they collected a wide array of memorabilia. Most belonged to Garfield: a Red Ryder BB gun mounted on the wall of the corridor, a royal seal from King George VI sitting on a shelf, a portrait of Garfield shouting in a microphone at a concert, and dozens of other pictures showing a variety of public figures and species of aliens he encountered along the way. A good number of them were females. Some of these pictures featured the biker. Ebony looked at all of them. "Ooh, get around," said Ebony to Garfield, who still had her wrists in his hands. "Could you pulls let me go?" "Will you be calling your jets with composures?" asked Garfield. "Yes," said Ebony. "I'm over it." Garfield let Ebony go. She brushed herself off and looked around the place. "Welcome to our home," said Garfield, holding his hands out. "Yay," said Ebony unenthusiastically. She walked around, looking at everything. It was pretty unappealing to her. Magazines everywhere, most of the Hugh Hefner type. They were rather disturbing. "Those are not John Freeman's," said the biker. "Good to know," said Ebony. "But who flies this thing?" "I do," replied Garfield, puffing his chest out and pointing at himself with his thumb. "What are you doing?" asked Ebony, unimpressed. "Showing off my manliness with pride," Garfield said matter-of-factly. "Are you not infatuated yet? The swooning should start soon with lovings." "No, am nut." Garfield exhaled, losing his posture. "How can this be?" he asked. "All sexy ladies be loving my manly muscles with admiration." "Welcome to 1997, said Ebony. "The year is 2023, actually," said the biker. "What?" screamed Ebony. "It's truth," said Garfield. "But," stuttered Ebony, "what happened?" "To Hogwarts. To Draco. To Voldemort. What in lasagna-drenched hell are you blathering about with nonsense words?" asked Garfield. "Maybe John Freeman can help," said the biker. He walked to the cockpit and opened the door. Just as he was about to enter, he saw Ebony still with Garfield. "Come in," said the biker. "Isn't John Freeman going to help me?" asked Ebony. "Where is he?" "John Freeman is here," said the biker, pointing to himself, "and ready to face full-life consequences." Ebony stared at him. When he said John Freeman, he referred to himself this whole time. Why would anyone talk like that? Sure, the big cat speech was odd, but this was just plain fucked. Ebony entered the cockpit, and John Freeman led her to the computer. He was a computer expert working in an IT lab before meeting Garfield. Now he was landed with a task of computer engineering and maintenance. But this was what he used to try to take his mind off of what he longed for but would never find again. He typed the word Hogwarts into the search engine and was directed to a nicely designed website with an emblem shaped like a shield divided into 4 parts. Each part had an animal: a lion on the top left, a snake on the top right, a badger on the bottom left, and a raven on the bottom right. Underneath the shield was a ribbon where the words Draco Normiens Nunquam Titilandus. Ebony knew that this was it. "Look up Draco Malfoy," said Ebony. John Freeman typed the name Draco Malfoy and was taken to a page listing all Hogwarts graduates. Draco Malfoy was found in the M section for the class of 1998. The moment she saw him, Ebony grew weak in the knees. Pale face, light hair, a look of superiority. This was the man of her dreams. He was the one who made her heart pound and her girlhood tremble. She lost count of how many nights she spent massaging herself to him. How often did she excuse herself from class to run to the lavatory because her panties were wet? She didn't know, and she didn't care. All that mattered was Draco Malfoy. "That's him," said Ebony. "I have to go back to Hogwarts." "But the website says Draco Malfoy graduated in 1998, said John Freeman. "Where is he then?" said Ebony defensively. John Freeman searched for Draco and came up with a profile. He read aloud. "The website says that Draco Malfoy lives at home with his son. Draco Malfoy is independently wealthy and a widower. "That's a lie!" screamed Ebony. "He would never do that. He would never marry someone else. I'm his one and only. I'm his immortal. I bring him to life, and he does the same for me. Now take me to Hogwarts." Garfield entered the cockpit, having heard it all. "Listen to me, woman," shouted Garfield. "If my partner speaks truth, it is best to believe it with acceptance." "Shut the fuck up, you fucking prep," screamed Ebony. Garfield raised his arm to strike her. She quickly retrieved her black wand from her asshole and pointed it at Garfield. "Friezo-Cato!" announced Ebony, waving her wand and pointing it at Garfield. Instantly he froze stiffly and fell onto his back. Ebony walked to him and stood over his face like a hawk. "Ooh, listen to me, you orange fuck," started Ebony. "Oo all are going to take me to Hogwarts now." John Freeman stood up and looked over Garfield. "Is Garfield alive?" asked John Freeman. "Yes," said Ebony, "but I know the killing curse. Would you like me to show you?" "Oh, please don't do that," pleaded John Freeman. "Then you will take me to Hogwarts?" "Yes, Garfield and John Freeman will take woman to Hogwarts. Just return Garfield to the way Garfield was." "'Kay," said Ebony, pointing her wand at Garfield. Waving and flicking again, she announced, "Removo spello." Garfield felt his limbs move as soon as the red light shot from the wand and hit his body. He bolted back up onto his feet and glared at Ebony. "Who are you?" demanded Garfield, "to commit such atrocity against me?" "The name is Ebony," she replied. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way." "What ridiculous name is that?" asked Garfield. "It doesn't matter. We will be throwing you off ship soon with force." John Freeman already said that Garfield and John Freeman will take Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way to Hogwarts, said John Freeman, and that if John Freeman and Garfield live up to John Freeman and Garfield's family name and face full life consequences, John Freeman and Garfield's lives would be spared. "I'm not scared of sorcerer witches," boasted Garfield. "I take on any danger with speed of cat greased with lightning." "Can you handle death?" asked Ebony, pulling out her wand. "I have died before," said Garfield, "but I've come back. I looked death in the face and kneed him in the groin and told him, 'Not today.' He ran away with whimperings." "That was because John Freeman and Garfield had resurrection stones," said John Freeman. "The planet and resurrection stones are gone now." "Must you always bring me down with cold watering?" asked Garfield, gritting his teeth. "She didn't know that. Now you're making us look weak and not as manly." If there was one thing about his partner that annoyed him, his unwavering honesty made his manliness look inadequate. But this was not the time for argument, so he continued. "Fine. We'll be taking you to Hoggen-Pigwarts with speed of rampaging water buffaloes." "Thangs. Get it? 'Cause I'm Gothic," said Ebony. "And it's Hogwarts." "That's what I said," answered Garfield. "Hogglywarts." "Set a course for Hogwarts with great urgency and of running chickens," said Garfield to John Freeman, who sat in the pilot's seat and set the course. Ebony sat next to him, smiling. Garfield entered his cabin and sat down in the lotus position, his eyebrows furrowed. Never before had a woman stood up to him more than once. This wasn't like him to let it happen. Maybe he was losing his edge. Traveling the world and the galaxy introduced him to many different cultures and views. Was this why he let Ebony get the upper hand? He didn't know. But he knew that his reputation was under attack by a sexy witch. He needed a plan, and fast. But before he could formulate any thought, the klaxon alarm sounded throughout the vessel. Garfield shot up to his feet. That alarm could mean only one thing. That one thing caused Garfield to smile excitedly. "What the fuck is going on?" screamed Ebony, covering her ears. "That is the time travel alarm," explained John Freeman. "You guys time travel?" asked Ebony. "Yes," said John Freeman. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way doesn't look incredulous." "We had Tim Turners at Hogwarts. My friend Bloody Mary Smith had one. She used it to get to all of her classes on Tim. Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway will have to tell John Freeman more about Hogwarts after the mission is complete. What mission? Asked Ebony. Aren't we going to Hogwarts right now? No, there is trouble, and it requires the attention of Garfield and John Freeman. We have to live up to family name and face full-life consequences. But can it wait till later? No, said Garfield. It cannot. He entered the cockpit, loaded with a belt full of guns and ammunition. The buckle had a drawing of lasagna on it. What's our mission? Asked Garfield. A place called... John Freeman looked closer to read the word correctly. Minas Tirith. What's Minas Tirith? Asked Ebony. Shoot first, ask questions later, said Garfield. All systems be going with maximum effort. It's time, said John Freeman, to live up to family name and face full-life consequences. John Freeman pressed a button and a psychedelic tunnel surrounded the ship. Their speed increased. Everything around them turned white. The three inhabitants gained sight once again. Ebony's hand instantly went to her head, which felt like a mandrake was screaming directly at her brain. John Freeman, whose headache was similarly painful, pulled out a small tin cartridge the size of a cigarette case. He opened it and pulled out 3 small tablets. He handed one to Ebony and one to Garfield. Take this, said John Freeman, gulping his tablet. It'll cure the headache. Ebony gulped her tablet down. Garfield stared at his tablet, scoffing. These are ladies' pills. Only the thrill of adventure can cure a headache with remedies. He stormed out of the cockpit, quickly gulping down the tablet when they weren't looking. How can you stand that moron? Asked Ebony. Garfield's manhood obsession may be overwhelming, said John Freeman, but Garfield is good in battle. Come, let Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway and John Freeman join Garfield before Garfield causes too much trouble. What kind of trouble? Asked Ebony. That kind of trouble, said John Freeman. Ebony followed him out of the ship and onto the courtyard of an enormous ivory castle. A big leafless tree stood proud in the center of it all. People around them stared at the docked spaceship in amazement, but others sparred words with Garfield, who confronted the guard. You cannot see the king until you state your business, said the guard. Here is my business, said Garfield. He grabbed the guard and headbutted him, sending him into the stone ground. Only his unmoving head was visible. Another guard checked him and drew back. He's dead, said the second guard to Garfield. You will escort yourself out of the kingdom of Gondor this instant. Escort this, said Garfield as he backhanded the second guard onto his back, unconsciousness. What is Garfield thinking just barging in here? Asked John Freeman. He will live, said Garfield. He is only unconscious with sleepings. Garfield and John Freeman talked about this many times, said John Freeman. I can't wait, said Garfield. You know this with awareness. Well, sometimes Garfield has to wait. Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway are in a strange land where many strange things might occur, and Garfield has already scared the citizens around here. They do not need to be fearing me with tremblings, said Garfield, turning to everyone. You do not need to be fearing me. I don't wish to harm you, only to save you from the threat which threatens your city with menacings. Follow me, said an old man. He led them to the doorway of the throne room. Ebony looked around. It was too bright for her. It could have used a slight darkening up. The old man opened the doors and they entered. Ahead of them was the throne, where a figure sat. Another was on his right side. The old man ushered Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman closer to the mysterious figure. Your Majesty, said the old man, 3 strange travelers have come to see you. The figure sitting on the throne looked at them. He was a strong-looking man with a full beard, long hair, and light eyes. He looked as if this was a position long reserved for him, but only achieved when he was forced to rise to the occasion. Quite an occasion it was, if only the trio knew. Your kingness, began Garfield. "It has come to our attention that a threat has entered your kingdom. We are here to destroy it with bullets and brawn." The person at his right, a woman with blonde hair and dead blue eyes, grabbed the king's shoulder tightly. "No," the king said monotonously. "There is no threat." "But the monitor on the ship said otherwise," said John Freeman. Excuse John Freeman, but what is the king's name?" "I am King Aragorn," said the king, "son of Arathorn. This is my advisor, Svetlana." "Welcome to our kingdom," said the woman named Svetlana. "Are you a prep?" asked Ebony. "Because you look like one." "I don't understand what you mean," said Svetlana. "Yeah, you're a prep," said Ebony, pulling out her wand. "Wait!" yelled John Freeman. "Knockius outus," said Ebony, waving her wand. A black orb shot out and hit the crystal Svetlana wore around her neck. It shattered, and a light shone through the throne room. It dimmed, and a naked woman with long hair was on the floor. She stood up and looked around. The first odd thing about her was that her ears were pointed. Ebony recognized this instantly. "Oh my fucking Satan!" she screamed. "Get it? 'Cause I'm Gothic." "You're a magical fairy!" "Not quite," said the naked woman, covering herself. "I'm an elf." "My name is Queen Arwen, and I am in dire need of clothing." "Look what you've done!" yelled Svetlana. Aragorn rubbed his eyes, looking up at Svetlana. "You!" he realized angrily. "You tricked me!" "All I thought about was us," said Svetlana, her eyes watering. Aragorn looked at Arwen lying on the ground and immediately ran to her side. He detached his cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it around his queen. But he wasn't finished with Svetlana. He turned back to her. "You told me you were a princess." "I was. I told you that the Dark Lord was after me when he took the hobbits to Isengard." Aragorn looked at Svetlana confused. "What?" "The hobbits are safely back in the Shire," said Arwen to Aragorn. "Isengard is abundant with trees. There is no evil there. Not anymore. The Watchwood is still there." "Enough soft stuff," said Garfield. "Let's get to fighting and loving with bullets blazing." "Very well," said Svetlana sadly. She lowered her hands and out came a dozen spiders. They scurried about the place. "We must stop them before they reach the citizens," Aragorn said urgently. He unsheathed his sword, the Flame of the West, and shielded Arwen. The old man ran for the door, but a spider pounced on him and ate his head. Garfield blew it away with his Desert Eagle. He shot at two more. This was something of a game to him, and he was beating everyone at it in his mind. John Freeman retrieved the semi-automatic weapon from the holder on his back and fired away at a few other spiders. He didn't like resorting to this type of violence, but this called for it. It was spiders after all. The hall was painted with spider guts when John Freeman was finished. Ebony shot black orbs from her wand, but the spiders would not stop multiplying. She looked up and caught Svetlana using her hands to open her robes. She looked closer. The spiders were escaping from her womb. Ew, she thought. Just then she saw a spider coming her way. She jumped and landed on the spider, crushing it. Her eyes turned back to Svetlana. The spiders exited single file out of her womb. An idea popped into her head. It would be tricky, but it just had to work. She ran into the line, using the spiders as stepping stones towards Svetlana. She performed the killing curse with a wave of her wand, and Svetlana went down like a broken pillar of salt. All of the spiders died as a result. Garfield and John Freeman turned to Ebony. "What?" asked Ebony. Garfield smiled and gave her a thumbs up. "Thank you so much," said Aragorn, who stood next to Arwen. "How can we repay the kindness?" "I will be needing payment of lasagna," said Garfield, "and maybe a night with much lovings." He looked at Arwen, who backed away in horror. "Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way," John Freeman began quickly, "will just take lasagna. John Freeman will teach King Aragorn how it is made." "Done," said King Aragorn. While John Freeman taught Aragorn how to make lasagna, Garfield approached Ebony. "That was good fighting," said Garfield. "How did you know how to defeat her?" "I don't know," said Ebony. "I just guessed." "It was a good guess with knowledge," said Garfield. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some lovings to make with this sexy elf lady." Garfield walked away from Ebony and headed in the same direction as John Freeman and the king and queen. "How many times does John Freeman have to tell Garfield," began John Freeman, "just because there's a beautiful woman doesn't mean Garfield can immediately do whatever Garfield wants." "I take all sexy ladies," said Garfield. He dropped a bag of ice and posed in a manly stance. It didn't help his point much that a big goose egg formed on his head. "Queen Arwen was married to King Aragorn," said John Freeman. "That means Queen Arwen was off limits. My friend, take a chance and test the limits of your boundaries with bravery adventures. You never know what you'll find." John Freeman knows that Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway are not welcome back to Gondor. Now excuse John Freeman. John Freeman must attend to next destination. John Freeman left Garfield in his cabin to nurse his injury. It constantly amazed the two for different reasons. Garfield, because why ladies had to put up a fight against his manly charms. John Freeman, because why they haven't been blocked from every corner of time and space by now due to Garfield's chauvinistic behavior. John Freeman entered the cockpit and saw Ebony looking at Draco's picture. He sat down next to her. "How is Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway?" asked John Freeman. "Depersed," said Ebony. "Would Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway wish to talk about it?" asked John Freeman. "No, I just want to see Draco again." "Very well." John Freeman set the course for Hogwarts. The ship landed on the grounds of a massive castle near a lake. It could bypass all of the magical barriers due to some computer hacks, all of John Freeman's design. The ship's walkway lowered. Ebony ran toward the doors of the castle's entrance. It was a pretty big castle and looked like it had been there since the 9th or 10th century. Huge, rambling, scary-looking, with a jumble of towers and battlements, it had been headed by only 4 people in its entire existence. Professor Albus Dumbledore, Dolores Umbridge, Severus Snape, and currently Minerva McGonagall, who succeeded Snape after his death. Snape, like McGonagall, succeeded Dumbledore after his death. Umbridge briefly took over when she was a Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Hers was a story never forgotten, especially by Ebony, who had several run-ins with her. Umbridge had a sizable amount of power in the wizarding world, but her reign ended thanks to some students, one of them being the famous Harry Potter. The school had gone through a lot outside of that, but somehow survived through the courage and persistence of its students and teachers. Ebony stood before the great doors. 25 years. Would it be the same as it was before? Of course it would. It just had to be the same. Why would they still have the sign warning about a giant squid outside the lake? True, stories about a giant squid in the lake ran rampant through the wizarding world, but if it was the same giant squid that fell in love and lust with the castle in her 5th year, then that meant the school would be the same back in 1997. She remembered hearing stories about Filch, a squib, a non-magical child with magical parents, who worked for the castle, having to clean the walls and floors of the castles due to a load of ink. It wasn't the ink from a quill bottle. No, this was different. It was full of mucus. They all knew it, but none wanted to say a word. For Ebony, it was weird that a cephalopod would fall in love with a school. But on the other hand, there was an oddly romantic nature to it. Society didn't stop this animal from making love to the school. Therefore, society wouldn't separate her from Draco. She drew her wand out, and she heard a roar from behind before she could cast any spell. She saw Garfield and John Freeman popping wheelies on their motorcycles and speeding toward her. She jumped out of the way. Garfield ran through the doors. John Freeman came in close behind him. Both riders turned off their engines. "Garfield beat John Freeman once again," said John Freeman. It was common for Garfield to beat him during these races. "Don't be getting discouraged, my friend," said Garfield. "Someday you may win." Garfield started before the countdown and finished back on the ship. But John Freeman didn't bother to tell him anymore. The truth didn't get to his giant orange friend. "What are you simpletons doing?" yelled Ebony. We were having a manly race with great cycling, Garfield explained, to see who would get there first. And you came in last, sweet cheeks. You broke the door down, said Ebony. I was going to use magic to get in. And if that didn't work... Magic not working? Well, in that case, we'll just knock. What are you, high? Of course magic works. Magic didn't keep John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven away from landing here, said John Freeman. Uno, nobody licks you, said Ebony. That is being enough, roared Garfield. I will not be having cruelty toward my friends with bullyings. Oh, fuck off, said Ebony. They moved further into the castle, with Ebony leading the way. Garfield manly strutted behind her. John Freeman caught up, but as soon as they ventured toward the doors of the great hall, they heard footsteps behind them. They saw a big man with a huge beard and lantern in his hand. He looked cross. Who are you? He demanded. How did you get in here? Hairgrid? Said Ebony. It's me, don't you remember? It's pronounced Hagrid, said the giant. Whatever, Hagrid. Don't you remember we were in a band together? I've never been in a band at all. But I do remember a girl who wanted me to be in a band and was bothering everyone about it. When they turned her down, she... Oh, no. Oh, no. Ebony? That's right. You're supposed to be dead. Surprise, poser. And who are these? Asked Hagrid, pointing to Garfield and John Freeman. Yes, he finally remembered Ebony, and it was a memory he didn't want to keep. While he was known to mingle with students, he never made any advances toward them. It was this that created the unwanted memory of her. I am Garfield, Garfield introduced himself, and this is my friend John Freeman. Footsteps bounded in the foyer. Leading the procession was an older woman wearing a pointy hat. At her tail were a few other teachers, one of them a dwarf. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Demanded the woman. Headmistress McGonagall, ma'am, said Hagrid to the woman. This young woman says she's a former student here. Miss McGoogle, said Ebony. It's me, Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. McGonagall approached Ebony. She dealt with all sorts of students. Each one was a different case. But there was one she would instead not remember, if only for all the trouble she caused them. Yet here she was, still looking as ridiculous as ever. Ebony, said McGonagall. How did you... Where is Draco? Demanded Ebony. Draco? Draco Malfoy, you stupid bick. Don't speak to her like that, yelled Hagrid. He didn't exactly understand the meaning behind what Ebony called McGonagall, but he gathered that it was intended as a slight against the headmistress. Shut the fuck up, poser. Draco Malfoy, McGonagall began, is not here. He hasn't been a Hogwarts student for over 20 years. Lie! Screamed Ebony. That's what John Freeman tried to tell Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, said John Freeman. But Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way wouldn't listen. I grow bored, screamed Garfield. Let's blow this popsicle stand and grab lasagna with ladies. McGonagall and the other teachers stared at Garfield. I think, she started, you need to leave. All of you. But, began Ebony. Now, boomed McGonagall. Ebony wanted to use her magic against McGonagall. She always hated it when teachers tried to keep her and Draco apart. But she knew full well that the teachers were more potent than she and the other students combined. Resigned, she and Garfield and John Freeman left Hogwarts. Back on the ship, Garfield lifted a 2,000-pound hand weight in each hand. More than one would like to raise, but he was known to overdo strength training. Ebony sat in the cockpit, listening to My Chemical Romance, a band from her youth. John Freeman sat in the driver's seat. The ship flew due to an autopilot. Ebony was deep in thought. What is Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way thinking about? Asked John Freeman. These thoughts were far too private to share publicly. Still, they included a night in Hogsmeade attending a Good Charlotte concert before they became a sensation, almost losing her virginity to Draco in the Forbidden Forest, and the instant shyness he felt around her. These were the moments that belonged to them, and she wanted him back. "How I'm gonna get Draco back," said Ebony. "Where did you say he was?" "At Draco Malfoy's mansion," said John Freeman. "Den dat is where I'll go," said Ebony. "Get us there." John Freeman set a course for London. "The ship is low on fuel," said John Freeman. It had been smooth sailing to London for the three. The destination was clear, and Ebony was soon to be with Draco. She even dressed for such an occasion. Black lace-top boots with high heels. On her legs were ripped red fishnets. A black leather mini-dress was wrapped around her body, designed to look like a corset. Red ripped fishnets covered her arms. Her hair was straightened into spikes. Her nails were painted black. A liberal appliance of black eyeliner was used. Her lips were painted black. An additional caking of white foundation rested on her already pale face. Appearance mattered greatly to Ebony, especially since she spent 1,000 years in hell trying to escape from prep clothing. When John Freeman first set the course for London, she told him to make a stop at Hot Topic so she could get herself some clothes. Everything in there was just as different, and shopping proved difficult due to the specificity of her list. "What the hell is this?" asked Ebony. She saw nothing but clothing with cartoons from Disney characters, superheroes, strange-looking thin boys and girls in school uniforms, and names of TV shows she missed out on for obvious reasons. "The Hot Topic store," said John Freeman. "No, it's not," said Ebony. "Look around you." "I am," said Garfield, "and all I see is sexy ladies with boys and other sexy ladies. What they be needing is man like me. I can give them lovings like they never knew with my Orange Love Comet." "Can you for once stop thinking about sex?" asked Ebony, disgusted. "Besides, these girls are too young for you." "Sexy ladies have an age limit?" asked Garfield. He never thought about the statute of limitations for age. However, he wondered more than once why some ladies were tighter in the vagina than others. At first, he attributed it to penis size, but he wasn't so sure it was just that anymore. "Yes," said Ebony. "You telling me that you had sex with underage girls?" "And what if I did?" asked Garfield defensively. "Besides, no sexy ladies have an age limit." "Ew, you fucking perv!" Ebony screamed. "You telling me you're a pedo?" All eyes in the store turned to Ebony. She hated it when people stared at her, especially if they were posers, and these people were posers in her mind. She flipped her middle finger at them. A young man dressed in the same clothing as the rest of the customers, but wearing a name tag on his chest, approached Ebony. "Ma'am," said the employee, "we'd appreciate it if you used family-friendly gestures in this environment." "And I'd appreciate it if you had gothic clothes rather than preppy clothes," said Ebony. "We have plenty of gothic clothing," said the employee. "Here, I'll show you." He led Ebony to an area, and she swooned. The only downside was there weren't any shirts for gothic bands like My Chemical Romance and Good Charlotte. How she learned about My Chemical Romance was still a mystery to all except those either fortunate or unfortunate enough to become close to Ebony, like her best friend, Raven. It was unknown what became of her after she graduated from Hogwarts. Some think she may have committed suicide, like she and Ebony often mused over, but others say she lived among Muggles and was a woman of the Catholic faith. They all agreed that she and Ebony shared almost everything, discounting bodily fluids. What Raven knew, and never told anyone, except her husband, a pro-life anti-LGBTQ+, Trump Republican senator from Greenbow, Alabama, was Ebony had a secret. There was a period in Ebony's life when she hated present-day Hogwarts. After she saw the movie Back to the Future, she became obsessed with the idea of knowing what the future holds. She knew that Bloody Mary had a time turner, which she used to attend all her classes. It was a tiny time machine she wore around her neck. One day, when Bloody Mary wasn't looking, Ebony took her time turner and set it a little further into the future than she intended. She therefore did not know her fate. Perhaps this was for the best. She roamed the future world, seeing all sorts of things for which she has no memory, except for a band of young men. Their name was My Chemical Romance. The lead singer was Gerard Way. She fell in love. The first song she heard was Welcome to the Black Parade. She knew instantly she had found that band for her. So she paid whatever money she had and bought a CD. She returned to her time and shared the music with Raven. They listened to it multiple times, and Ebony decided to adopt the last name Way as her own. Of course, when she returned to the land of the living, it was a devastating blow to learn that My Chemical Romance broke up in 2013. That must be why hell was dispersed, said Ebony when she read the news on the computer in the ship. But she couldn't stay stuck on that. She had a mission, and with the items bought, she and her odd comrades set out for Malfoy Mansion. The klaxon alarms sounded throughout the ship. While Garfield exuded enthusiasm over the next mission, Ebony was less enthused. "You got to be kidding," exclaimed Ebony. "Where to?" said Garfield. "Seattle, Washington," said John Freeman. "Why the fuck are we going to Seattle?" asked Ebony. "We'll see with revelations," said Garfield. The ship landed in the courtyard of a dilapidated high school, and while the children saw the vehicle, they didn't respond in a way considered appropriate for an event like this. Instead, they gave a long, resounding ooh in perfect unison. They didn't jump either when the walkway lowered. Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman exited the ship. They looked around, seeing no immediate threat in sight. Ebony stared at the expressionless teenagers. Discomfort rose within her. "What the fuck are you looking at, Preps?" she yelled. "That is not the way to talk to the people Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way will be saving," said John Freeman. "Let John Freeman show Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way how to talk to teenagers." He looked at the kids. "Citizens of the high school," he began. "John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way do not wish harm. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way only wish to save the people of this high school. Who is this principal?" A man stepped forward. Balding and nervous, he looked at them. "Hello, strangers," he said. "I'm Principal Lehman." John Freeman pointed to himself, then to the respective others, Garfield and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. "We are here to do manly things," said Garfield. "Tell us, who threatens your elementary playground field with bullyings?" "It's not an elementary school, you dunce," said Ebony. "It's a high school." "Is there a person that has become a problem?" asked John Freeman. "Or persons?" "There are 2 boys," said Lehman, "but they're not here." "Where are they?" asked John Freeman. "I'll show you the way," said Lehman. His nervousness came through even more prominently than before. Something about the 2 boys responsible for the trio's call to action spooked the principal. Both John Freeman and Garfield saw it, but they let the man take all 3 of them into the building. Anyone unfortunate enough to catch a glimpse of the exterior of this school would be wise to consider themselves fortunate never to see the interior, because it was potentially worse. Lehman led the trio down the hall. The floor tiles were so filthy and molded that the mold pushed the tiles out of the grouting. The wall's paint came off in chips and scattered onto the floor. The ceiling was stained with what looked like brown paint. "Why are the ceiling tiles brown?" asked John Freeman. "Was paint splashed upon them?" "That's not paint," said Ebony. "It is." The pause made Lehman, John Freeman, and Garfield uncomfortable. Ebony didn't usually use dramatic pauses long enough to drive a freight train through them. Yet here she was, silent as the blood splatter. Ebony answered jarringly. Her cohorts and Lehman jumped. "Yes," said Lehman, then leaned forward to John Freeman. "Did she just have a stroke?" "John Freeman doesn't know," said John Freeman. "John Freeman doesn't know," said John Freeman. John Freeman hasn't known Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way long enough to know of any ailments physically or mentally. or any current medications currently prescribed. But it was now added to his schedule once the mission was completed. Lehman continued to a door leading to a classroom. This number was 217. "They're in here," said Lehman, trying to control his wavering voice. Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony readied their weapons. Lehman grabbed the doorknob and turned it slowly. He swung the door open, and John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony bolted inside, pointing their Desert Eagles and wand ahead, but they stopped before they could open fire. The sight was strange, even by the standards of John Freeman and Garfield. Ahead of them were 3 hostages sitting bound to their chairs. 2 of them were teenage girls. Both were short. But one was a little plumper and had wide eyes and black hair. The other was skinny and had blonde hair. They both looked scared out of their minds and confused. The third hostage was a middle-aged man with a gut who sweated profusely. Pacing around the room was a small, pale-faced, doe-eyed boy with long hair, a skinny build, and muscular arms. "This is wrong and you know it is, Arthur," he said to nobody. "People are getting hurt. Abby is scared." He looked like he was trying to de-escalate the problem, but his expression darkened as soon as he said that. He turned to show the left side of his face, painted like a skull. "Like you care about what happens," said the one named Arthur. "You're no saint yourself, James." "What is going on here?" asked Ebony. "This is the problem," said Lehman. "Gregory Seseska. But he has 2 other personalities, James Patrick and Arthur Gale. James, he says, represents the light. Arthur represents the dark. But if you listen to them individually, it's difficult to say who's darker than whom. And who is that?" She pointed to the desk where crouched was a more petite boy. He looked like a more appealing and better-dressed version of Gollum. "Don't say that about James," the boys said to the one named James. "It's okay, Davis," said James. "I can handle this." "Shut up, Davis," said Arthur. "The smart ones are talking." "Don't pick on Davis," said James. "What are you going to do about it, you white-knighting tryhard?" "I'll call the cops on you. That's what I'll do." "And what'll they say? Look at us. We share the same body. God, this is just one more reason why I hate you." "Enough fighting with yourself," said Garfield. "Stay out of this, you orange freak of goddamn nature," screamed Arthur. Arthur raised his Desert Eagle at Arthur, but James held out his arms. "Don't shoot!" yelled James. Garfield pulled the trigger and put a bullet into the teenage boy's head. Greg fell back and landed on the ground, lifeless. The girls stared down in shock. Lehman, John Freeman, and Ebony leaned in to look at the body. "No!" screamed Davis. He pounced onto the body, weeping. Lehman walked to him to try and comfort him. "Stay away," said Davis. "Leave us alone." He hugged Greg's body, his shoulders shaking, but he bolted up and produced a knife made of flint. The trio held up their weapons in defense, but Davis didn't go after them. Instead, he flipped the blade downward and plunged it into his chest. He worked the knife around and finally discarded it. The girls screamed as Davis thrust his hand into the wound. He gasped and choked. Even John Freeman and Principal Lehman were horrified. Ebony and Garfield watched, intrigued. Davis yanked his hand out with one strong tug, holding his bloody, pulsating heart. Everyone gasped. Davis brought the organ to Greg's lips and slowly died. The heart detached from the arteries and veins, trailing from Davis's chest wound, and fought its way down Greg's throat, creating a bullfrog appearance in the neck, until finally descending to wherever in the body it wanted to go. Greg's body shook and convulsed like a current of electricity was introduced into the corpse. The trio, Lehman, the teacher, and the girls watched in shock and terror. The body stopped. The living people leaned in for a closer inspection. The hair turned light and retracted into the scalp, creating a bowl cut. The eyes opened, and the body bolted back up. "Oh, hey, guys," he said in a high-pitched voice like someone increased the speed of his speech. "I am Chibi Durf!" He screeched the name Chibi Durf. The trio, teachers, and the girls were repulsed. Chibi walked to Davis's body. "Oh, look," he said, "a dead body. What wonderful things can I do with this?" He looked at the hostages. Whatever went through his head at that point wouldn't be good. He picked up Davis's corpse and moved its legs with a walking motion toward the teacher. Once at the destination, he moved his right hand to land on the teacher's shoulder. "Hey, Mr. Hanson," said Chibi, "would you like to play with me, poopy poo poop?" Chibi grabbed both of Davis's hands and positioned them on each side of Mr. Hanson's head. He brought the hands together like a monkey who played cymbals and crushed Mr. Hanson's head. Blood geysered straight up onto the ceiling tile and rained downward, splattering the girls. They were appropriately disgusted. Hanson's corpse leaned forward, but the ropes kept it from falling out of the chair. "That explains the blood," said Ebony. "Put down the body, Chibi," said Garfield, "or taste more lead with gunfires." "I don't wanna," screamed Chibi. "I wanna play more." A glow surrounded Chibi, and Davis's corpse melded with his body. He grew a good 10 feet and looked like he and Davis went through Seth Brundle's telepod together in The Fly. It was a gruesome sight. "I wanna play!" bellowed Chibi Davis. "Garfield," said John Freeman. "John Freeman thinks it's time to open fire." "I agree," said Garfield. They brought out machine guns from a suitcase John Freeman carried with him and commenced a firefight on Chibi Davis. Although bullets riddled the body, nothing seemed to bring the monster down. Ebony raised her wand but caught a glimpse of a patch in Chibi Davis's chest. She remembered when she was a small child and a teacher read her the book The Hobbit. Ebony hated that book, but at that moment she remembered how the dragon Smaug was defeated. A small patch in the armor where a scale should be instead of exposed flesh. That was how Bard killed Smaug. That must be this thing's weak spot, she thought, returning to the current situation. Why these two morons weren't seeing it was beyond her comprehension. Ebony shot a black orb into the hole, and Chibi Davis froze. "Sup shotting!" screamed Ebony. The gunslingers ceased firing. How they understood her command, they didn't know. But they looked ahead and saw Chibi Davis convulsing and breaking down. "I'm a banana!" screamed Chibi Davis. He exploded, painting the entire classroom red. The texture of the blood looked similar to mashed bananas. The trio walked to the girls and untied them. "Are you two girls okay?" asked John Freeman. "Yes," said the plump one. "We are, I think." "Please state the names," said John Freeman. "I'm Abigail," said the plump one. "And I'm Ashley," said the other. "And I am Garfield," he introduced himself. Brother," groaned Ebony. "And it's a good thing we saved you," said Garfield, "before I called in reinforcements." "What reinforcements?" asked Ebony sarcastically. "One press of this," Garfield pointed to his belt buckle, "and reinforcements save us with savings." The belt buckle looked like a slice of lasagna. "Ah, good thing I found a weak spot, huh?" "A very good thing," said John Freeman. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way did good once again." "Only problem is," Ebony took another long dramatic pause, "I'm soaked in blood." "Don't worry," said John Freeman. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way can change out of that on the ship." A boy popped from behind the desk. The trio got their weapons ready. "Don't shoot," said Lehman. "He's a student." They lowered their weapons. The boy looked around the room, but didn't appear fazed. "Wow," he finally said. "This is truly the hero's work." "I am that hero," said Garfield. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some lovings to make." He winked at the two girls, who giggled flirtatiously. Garfield led Abigail and Ashley out of the room. "That's exactly what I desire from my novella," said the boy. "What's his name?" "Garfield," said John Freeman. "That name won't stay in place," said the boy. "I'll call him Gregner." "Who are you?" asked Ebony. "My handle is Jim Theus," said the boy. "Some individuals refer to me as Captain Thesaurus, and I'm currently inscribing a novella called The Eye of Argon." "Sounds stupid," said Ebony, and she exited the room. "Forgive Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way," said John Freeman, and allowed John Freeman to stay for a while and aid in paperwork and cleanup. "That is much appreciated," said Lehman. "Quite a bit to clean up." "The ship is low on fuel," said John Freeman. "How can this be? asked Garfield. The detour to Hot Topic used up some of the fuel, explained John Freeman, as did the Seattle mission. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way will have to make a quick stop to refuel. So are you saying this was my fault, Prep? Asked Ebony. It was bad enough that she had to deal with the two of the weirdest men she'd ever met, but now they had to stop again before reaching Draco. That just wasn't fair. She just changed out of the bloody clothes to see Draco in a more presentable way. A black leather dress, a pentagram necklace, combat boots, black fishnets, 4 pairs of earrings, and her hair was fashioned in a semi-messy bun. No, said John Freeman. John Freeman isn't blaming Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. Could you fucking stop talking like dat? Said Ebony. Like what? Lick dat. Like what? Saying our nams all the time. It's irritating. I know who the fuck I am, and I know who the fuck you are. Garfield stepped forward, saying, Don't be screaming at my friend, bitch tits, or I will be smacking you into outer hemispheres with force. You don't want that, do you? Ebony quieted down and stared at Garfield. For once, since they met, she agreed that he was right. She didn't want him to hit her. At the same time, however, she couldn't deny that she needed these 2 men to get her to Draco. Okay, resigned Ebony. We'll stop for gas. Get us there in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, said Garfield to John Freeman. They shared a handshake that only the men knew. Garfield had found John Freeman half dead in a demolished building overrun by zombies. Of course, zombies didn't frighten Garfield, but that didn't mean he was naive to the danger of the living dead. When the horde of flesh-eaters nearly overtook him, John Freeman rescued him before he could call for backup. Garfield was impressed by his performance on the battlefield and asked if he would be interested in aiding him in more quests. John Freeman was hesitant. He had just lost his brother Gordon Freeman and longed to return to his wife and Henry Freeman, his son. John Freeman asked his strange rescuer if he could give him a ride home. At first, Garfield didn't want to because home life was for ladies and children instead of men. But he understood John Freeman's mind. The family was essential to many people. He saw this in the alien races he saved across the universe. But when they arrived at his house, John Freeman was devastated to find that his family had gone missing. They left a note stating that they had gone to seek shelter from a race of alien beings called Combines, and were sorry they couldn't see him again. John Freeman told Garfield that he needed to find them again, and fast. Garfield agreed, but warned him of the lifestyle he possessed and whether he was brave enough to handle it. So began their partnership. John Freeman landed on the ship in an airfield and conversed with the owner about payment. Garfield stood next to him, haggling prices. The owner didn't want to go through this, but he had a difficult time dealing with fluctuating gas prices. Now he had a sizable anthropomorphic cat and an odd-speaking American haggling prices with him like Arab traders. And he was Arabic! Ebony grew bored listening to the 2 idiots and headed to explore more. The entire square looked like something out of a preppy movie like Star Wars. Flat-screen TVs, devices that looked like computer screens but were advertised as phones. They were said not only to make calls and text messages, but could store music and movies and give a person access to the internet. What a revolutionary concept. The music itself seemed to have changed into that which was harder to find genuinely gothic bands. Most were Billie Eilish, Ed Sheeran, Kanye West, Lizzo, Imagine Dragons, and BTS, all of which looked preppy to her. She hated preps, and all around her was nothing but preps. At least in Hogwarts, she was around like-minded people, like the Slytherin students. They weren't preppy in the slightest, and since most of the student body was Slytherin, she felt right at home. At least, that was how she remembered her time at Hogwarts. When Ebony walked past the window of an electronics store, she saw something she had never expected to come across since her release from hell. She ran into the store and stopped just a few feet away from a man and a woman. The man had shorter hair than he did in his adolescent years, and although it had traces of gray, it was still as dark as a blackboard. His eyes were still as green as a fresh pickled toad, and his glasses, perfectly round lenses, rested on his nose. A lightning bolt-shaped scar rested above his right eyebrow. Anyone with common sense knew this to be the famous boy who lived, Harry Potter. Another familiar face was the woman at his side, red hair and freckles. "Ginny," said Harry to the woman, "I don't think our wages will cover an iPad for Albus." "I know, Harry," said the woman named Ginny, "but he needs it to help him through the semester." "I wish they had student discounts for our children," said Harry. "I've written every letter I can to the Ministry of Magic about it, and so have Ron and Hermione. Still nothing. It makes no sense to me. They want to update the teaching tools for their students, but they won't offer anything to help cut the cost. At this rate, it's like we won't be able to make ends meet." "We will, Harry. Don't worry. This isn't the worst we faced. I'll take the Death Eaters and Burning Scar over this." "You don't mean that. Try me." "I know it's frustrating, but this is what happens when Umbridge's nephew heads the Ministry of Magic. Bridges are burned, Muggleborns become scapegoats, and all we get from his leadership are ego-stroking rallies and an endless wave of tweets claiming it all as fake news." "Vampire?" asked Ebony. Harry and Ginny turned to look at Ebony. This was the first time they'd heard that word used in years. "Hello?" started Harry. "Can I help you?" "Vampire," repeated Ebony. "Don't you remember me?" "No, I don't," said Harry, confused. "You may be confusing me with someone else." "No, I remember you, Vampire Potter. You went to Hogwarts with me. You did too, Darkness. But you weren't married. BTW, how could you marry her? She's so basic. You were fucking Draco." "What the hell are you talking about?" asked Ginny. "What the hell are you talking about?" echoed Harry. "We were in Slytherin together," explained Ebony. "You, me, Draco, Diabolo, and Bloody Mary Smith, Darkness, Hagrid, and Dracula. We went to concerts at Hogsmeade and slashed our wrists depressingly." Harry and Ginny stared at each other. They were confused, as if someone had told them that Brexit was a practical joke played by Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher's ghost. Harry stared closer at Ebony, and the proverbial bell went off in his head. He knew. "Ebony, Darkness, Dementia, Raven Way," said Harry. "You know her?" asked Ginny. She'd known Harry since her first year of Hogwarts. She only knew about two women in his life: Hermione Weasley, their sister-in-law, and Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw witch who was a year older than Harry, but no one, not even Harry, talked about her, especially since she ratted them out to Umbridge to build Dumbledore's army. This, however, bordered on both scary and dubious. "Yes," said Harry, "I know her, but I was never around her." "Yes, you were," said Ebony. "We were in a band together. I was one of the witches in Dumbledore's army." "You were also the one who tried to grab me," said Harry. "Do you remember that?" That caused Ebony to be silent for the first time. "But," she started again, "you wanted me. You and Draco both. You fought over me. We even had sex with each other." "We never did that," said Harry. Of all the things he said to have done, having an intimate relationship with Draco Malfoy was his least favorite of the rumors. He never understood what it was about him and Draco that led younger witches, wizards, muggles, and squibs, principally witches and female muggles and squibs, to fantasize about them as a couple. They hardly had anything in common, which was primarily true regarding the validity of witches and wizards. Draco was a pureblood, and he believed he and other purebloods to be superior to witches and wizards who were either half-blood or muggle-born, like Harry's sister-in-law, Hermione Weasley. This was not a philosophy Harry aligned with at all, and he certainly never saw himself becoming friends with someone who did uphold that viewpoint. "I never had that kind of relationship with Draco," said Harry, "and I know he never had that kind of relationship with you." "You're lying," yelled Ebony. "We were all in the same house together." "No, we weren't," said Harry. "Ginny, Hermione, Ron, Neville, and myself were in Gryffindor. Draco was in Slytherin. You, however, were not in Slytherin." "Lies, you poser!" screamed Ebony. Now the entire store turned their attention to the three. Ginny grew embarrassed. "Harry," said Ginny, "let's just go. We can shop some other time." "Yes," said Harry. "I don't know how you came back, Ebony, but I know you won't stop looking for Draco. Do yourself a service. Stop right now. There's no reason for you to disturb him or his son. Grow up. You should be an adult by now anyway. Harry and Ginny Potter left the store. Ebony stood still, at a loss for words. How could they say this to her? How could anyone? How could they not remember? But maybe they were right. Perhaps it was time to move on? She ran out of the shop. Garfield, carrying a plastic bag full of clothing and a shoebox, and John Freeman walked around. They couldn't find Ebony anywhere. A figure ran past them at great speed. They recognized it as Ebony and followed her, matching her pace. They all reached the ship. Ebony ran up the walkway and into her cabin. She found a straight razor she pilfered from John Freeman's medicine cabinet. She slashed her wrists and lay down in bed. The door was forced open, almost breaking the gears beyond repair. Garfield carried the unconscious Ebony out of her room, trailing blood from her slashed wrists along the way. John Freeman set up an operating table in the infirmary and got to work at once. While they both had basic medical training, gleaned only from their expeditions to other worlds, neither John Freeman nor Garfield had a medical license. Therefore, any medical practice should have landed them in federal prison. Fortunately for them both, it didn't. Their approach was always private, and patients were never charged. John Freeman was insistent on that. He didn't want to find himself in jail before he had the chance to locate his family again. Garfield and John Freeman need to stop the bleeding at once, said John Freeman. Quick, place Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway on the operating table and get John Freeman 2 tourniquets. Garfield placed Ebony on the table and raced to the cabinet, where he rooted around for a few seconds before finally coming up with 2 rubber tourniquets. He hurried them to John Freeman, who wrapped one of the tourniquets around Ebony's wrists. What else should be done, medical man? Asked Garfield. Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway lost quite a bit of blood, diagnosed John Freeman. John Freeman thinks a blood transfusion is required to keep Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway from slipping into a coma and dying. I will offer my life-saving blood with charity, said Garfield. What's Garfield's blood type? The type that can save lives and fill my love anaconda with much power for ladies. That's not what John Freeman meant. What is Garfield's blood type? A positive, B positive, AB positive, O positive, A negative, B negative, AB negative, O negative. This is important because the blood type that doesn't match Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway's blood type could lead to death. John Freeman will have to run some tests. Save your tests for the examination room, said Garfield in a tone of voice meant to make himself sound wittier than in reality. My blood type is savior to all bloodless women. What about STDs? Challenged John Freeman. Garfield has been around. John Freeman doesn't know where exactly Garfield's love anaconda has been. Insults! Thundered Garfield. I always practice safe sex. I've given lectures about it. Now, hook me up to Ebony now with your machines. We are losing her faster than lasagna down my throat. Garfield didn't know, but John Freeman learned that his sexual escapades resulted in numerous progeny. Not all of them were good-looking, but they were his children. However, John Freeman didn't understand that his exploits stopped producing children only 3 years ago. He couldn't understand that because Garfield never got a vasectomy or neutered because his sex drive was still strong. And if he did, he never said anything. It's against John Freeman's better judgment, said John Freeman, but please take a seat, and John Freeman will prepare Garfield. Garfield sat in a chair next to Ebony. He said, Do not be worrying, Gothic princess. I'll save you both here and in bed with lovings. John Freeman got the needle and bag out and was ready to go. He sat next to Garfield, who held out his right arm. A prominent vein showed in the crook of his elbow. John Freeman stuck the needle into the vein. A glance up at Garfield showed that the cat wasn't affected. No pain. Please make a fist a few times, said John Freeman. Garfield made a fist, keeping it clenched. The bag instantly filled up with blood. John Freeman told him to release, withdrew the needle, patched Garfield up, and took the bag to Ebony. Ebony shot upright on the table, wide awake, as if from a nightmare. She looked around frantically. Her eyes spotted the blood bag in John Freeman's hand. She quickly snatched it from his hand and tore off the hard plastic top with her teeth. She spat it out, and the plastic end ricocheted off the wall and pelted Garfield's head. He jumped onto his feet and got in a fighting stance for whatever hit him. But nobody was around to challenge him. He turned to see John Freeman gawking. He turned to Ebony and understood. Ebony gulped the bag's contents down so fast that Garfield needed a moment to rub his eyes. Ebony released the drained blood bag to the ground. "Ah," sighed Ebony, her mouth crimson. "Needed that?" She finally noticed Garfield and John Freeman staring at her. "What the fuck are you two looking at?" she asked. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Wade drank that entire blood bag," said John Freeman. "Yeah," said Ebony. "Am a vampire after all." "Then how can you walk around in daylight without burning to a cinder with ashes?" asked Garfield. "I don't know," said Ebony. "John Freeman must study Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way," said John Freeman. "This is the first time a vampire has entered the ship." "Yeah, I don't think so," said Ebony. "Ma know what is reserved for only—" She fell silent, then jumped off the table. She wobbled for a bit of a while, but regained balance. Despite what she thought that blood would do for her, Ebony was still lightheaded for being almost wholly exsanguinated. Her wrists didn't heal either. They were still bleeding. Odd, Ebony thought, but didn't have enough energy to devote the entire thought to the discrepancy. Both Garfield and John Freeman stood at attention, ready to catch her. "I'm fine," said Ebony, holding her hands out. Her wrists were still open. "At least let John Freeman put some bandages on Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way's wrists," offered John Freeman. "They'll heal on their own," said Ebony. They should, she thought. She walked out of the infirmary. John Freeman thinks either John Freeman or Garfield should go check on Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. "I will go," said Garfield. "I gave her my blood. She is my responsibility with duties." He walked out of the room. Ebony laid down across the cot, looking up at the ceiling. Her thoughts wandered far away, far back to her time at Hogwarts when she and Draco went to Hogsmeade to attend a Good Charlotte concert before the band grew as big as they were in the 20-aughts and 2010s. Of course, Ebony wasn't there for either of those decades. All the more reason why she should slit her wrists, she thought. But she didn't have the energy to do it again, and when she entered the room, she found that every sharp object had been removed. John Freeman, more likely, did that. She didn't see Garfield being that cognizant. She renavigated her mind back to the dark forest, strictly forbidden to all students, as Professor Dumbledore told the first years, where she first made love to Draco. It was blissful having him inside of her, feeling every detail of him, her eyes staring into his sad and depressing eyes, knowing that they both were thinking the same thing. This was where their passions were, where they should stay. Between the two of them, forever. She went back to this moment quite a bit, but whenever she thought about it, her thoughts were interrupted by someone or something. The first intrusion was Dumbledore when he caught them before Draco could release his seed inside of her and chastise them for being in love. Now it was the sound of rapping outside of her door. "Who is it?" asked Ebony, annoyed. "It's just me," said Garfield. "What do you want?" asked Ebony, her annoyance increasing. "Can I come in with enterings?" "Sure." The door slid open and Garfield entered. The door closed behind him. "It's good to see the door is still working," he said. "What are you talking about?" asked Ebony. "I nearly broke it trying to get to you when you cut your wrists," explained Garfield. "Oh," said Ebony. She sat up on the side of the bed. Garfield sat next to her. "What's the buzz?" asked Garfield. "Tell me what's a-happening." "I ran into an old friend today," started Ebony. "Or I thought he was a friend. Now he's just a poser.
Anyway, he told me to leave Draco alone and that all I am is a nuisance to people. Is that true? Am I nothing but a nuisance? You're no nuisance to us, said Garfield. We saved you from permanent death. That should be telling you something. I guess, said Ebony, not convinced. I've been wanting to ask, said Garfield. How did you end up underground in hell? I don't know, said Ebony. All I remember is getting shot in the heart by Voldemort. And then I was in hell, taking off prep clothing. I don't even know why I was in hell. I don't know what I did wrong. All I ever wanted was Draco. All I ever wanted was for people to accept me for who I am. But they never did, so I flipped them off and yelled at them. Maybe that's why I went to hell. Well, that and also I'm a Satanist, so I guess it made sense. But why would I experience that? Nothing but prep clothing. Garfield was confused, not because he was unfamiliar with her world despite remembering the name Hogwarts, but because her story made no sense to him. I don't know, said Garfield, but when I need to be thinking, I always go to the gym to work out. Why don't we try it out with exercise? I don't think so. Why not? Because gyms are for preps and posers. The only preps I know is preparing to fight for truth, justice, and lasagna and ladies, and the only posers I know are these posers. He flexed his muscles and created various other poses. Ebony watched, and even though it went against her better judgment as a goth, Satanist, vampire, and witch in the Slytherin house, she laughed. It was a good laugh. A release. All right, said Ebony. I'll go to your preppy gym. First, said Garfield, we need to get you some gym clothes. You can't be burning fat and calories wearing that. He pointed to her dress. Do you have any in black? Asked Ebony. The gym wasn't fancy, but it did have weights that looked too heavy for humans to lift. Of course, Ebony didn't know because she had never set foot in a gymnasium. Hogwarts didn't have much of a physical education of which to boast outside of flying lessons, and Quidditch was the only sport regularly played. The Triwizard Tournament was revived and discontinued every 200 to 300 years due to the frequency of death among participants. Everyone in Ebony's class remembered Cedric Diggory, who died at the hand of Lord Voldemort during the 1994 to 1995 tournament. No one knew whether or not it would stay discontinued after that, but considering the unfortunate lapse in memory, it was likely to be revived again. And considering the current head of the Ministry of Magic, it may return sooner than expected. Safety was not a primary concern for the head of Ministry of Magic. He only cared about his base of loyal followers. Those are women's weights over there, said Garfield, pointing to a rack of 500-pound hand weights. Although she had never set foot in a gymnasium, it still confused Ebony that Garfield would call these women's weights. She never lifted anything heavier than a gun in her life. How did Garfield expect her to lift these ungodly things? These are men's weights, said Garfield, pointing to the 10,000-pound weights. Any questions? No, lied Ebony. It seems easy to figure out. Ebony wore a sleeveless workout shirt and shorts, all of which were black, and black workout socks and shoes. Considering they rarely had female company for longer than a day, Garfield and John Freeman saw no reason to invest money in clothes for women. But Garfield had a plan, which required buying workout clothes for Ebony while they were getting gas in London. He had to guess what size bra she needed. Judging by her dress, he thought possibly an A-cup would be fine. Miraculously, it was. And it was black, of course. But even though it all fit, she still didn't quite feel like herself. It wasn't just the fact that she was wearing workout clothes. It was something else. The feeling had grown stronger since waking up and drinking Garfield's blood. Then let us begin, said Garfield. He sat on the workout bench and grabbed a 10,000-pound weight as quickly as a Tupperware bowl. Ebony watched, unimpressed, and went to the rack to pick up a 5-pound weight. She lifted it like it was an empty suitcase. This is rather pathetic, thought Ebony. Here I am trying to show Garfield that his view of women being weak is outdated and medieval, and I'm scared of a 500-pound weight for Satan's sake. Get it? 'Cause I'm a Satanist. I should have super strength. I'm a vampire. She soon realized, however, that she wasn't tired. She was growing bored. She put down the hand weight and moved to a 700-pound dumbbell. When she picked it up, the hand weight worked against her, but she brought it above her head. She grabbed the other dumbbell and worked out her arms with them. An exhilarating rush ran through her body. Her muscles burned from lactic acid in her arms. Sweat formed on her face and body, providing a coolant to the burn. Her heart thumped firmly in her left breast. She looked down and saw it bobbing in her shirt. All unique feelings never experienced before, and all of them were good. She watched Garfield the entire time. When he finished with the sets, so did she. While his shirtless body was lightly matted with sweat, hers was drenched like she had just gone swimming. "Are you okay?" asked Ebony. "Yeah," said Ebony. "It's a lot of work, but I lick it." "I thought you would," said Garfield. "How about a cool-down jog?" "'Kay," said Ebony. The two oddities jogged through the corridors of the ship and decks. At one point, they almost hit John Freeman. They both laughed, stopped running, and looked at each other for the longest time. They were panting, sweating, smiling. They felt a tug in between themselves. Slowly, they moved toward each other's faces. Ebony barely felt the whiskers from Garfield's upper lip touch her face. Before a result could take place, Ebony drew back. "I should get a bath," said Ebony and walked away. Garfield stared. Ebony turned around. "Fangs," she said. "Get it? 'Cause I'm Gothic," and resumed her way. "Garfield tried to do what?" exclaimed John Freeman. "It was meant to be, okay?" replied Garfield offensively. "Garfield doesn't know that," said John Freeman. "Besides, Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way is too young for Garfield." "How do you know that, Mr. Know-It-All?" John Freeman read Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way's file from Hogwarts archives, explained John Freeman. And John Freeman is telling Garfield Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way is a basket case. "Basket of case?" asked Garfield. "Ha! No such thing. She is lonely lady who happens to be a vampire." "That's the other thing," said John Freeman. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way is not a vampire." "What makes you so sure?" asked Garfield defensively. It didn't make sense that Ebony wouldn't be a vampire when they saw her drink a whole pint of Garfield's blood. What human girl did that? None of which Garfield knew. "According to Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way's file," started John Freeman, "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way was cursed by a student from the Hufflepuff house named Susan Bones. Susan Bones told the Ministry of Magic that Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way had yelled at the students from the Hufflepuff house multiple times for being what Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way called preps. Even though Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way was a student in the Hufflepuff house. After nothing was accomplished and no full-life consequences faced, Susan Bones cursed Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way out of spite. Susan Bones figured out that if Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way wanted to be a Gothic vampire witch, then Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way should get what Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way's wish. But blood doesn't heal Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way like it would heal a vampire. Instead, drinking blood gives Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way the feeling that it's rejuvenating Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. Like John Freeman and Garfield, Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way's wounds heal naturally. With time. What is this prep that Ebony always speaks of? Prep is a term used to refer to people who are normal or mainstream. Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way often called all students and teachers preps or posers. That means a person who looks Gothic but in reality isn't. A liar. When simply put, yes. "What happened to her?" asked Garfield. "How did she end up in hell?" This new information was overstimulating, even for Garfield, but he needed to know. "During the war at Hogwarts," began John Freeman, "when an evil wizard named Thomas Marvolo Riddle, who went by the name Lord Voldemort, and his Death Eaters attacked. The students and teachers fought back. Many were lost along the way, including Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. A Death Eater pulled a gun on Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way after Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way disarmed the Death Eater of the Death Eater's wand. After the two runners nearly knocked him over, John Freeman searched for Garfield and Ebony. and what he saw on the surveillance monitors prompted him to tell Garfield what he learned while he and Ebony were speaking in her quarters. Part of the discovery made him sad because none of the students had fond memories of her, and a good number of them were glad she died in the manner she did. Another part of him felt extreme fear for his comrade, because what he also learned about the strange girl was that her obsession with Gothic fashion and a boy wizard named Draco Malfoy, with whom she never had a real relationship, nor did she ever date, was due to borderline personality disorder, diagnosed post-mortem. Of course, he knew many people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Most didn't threaten either himself, his brother, or his family the way Ebony posed a danger to himself and Garfield. When it came to Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, they were dealing with a person who also may have had narcissism, possibly sociopathy. All warning signs. "So what's your point, Dr. Mann?" asked Garfield. "John Freeman's point," began John Freeman, "is John Freeman and Garfield should think about possibly putting Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way in a psychiatric hospital, because Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way can't stay on the ship." "You can't be serious," said Garfield. "She has nowhere else to go. No one else to turn to with trust." "That is no longer Garfield or John Freeman's concern," said John Freeman. "That's really up to the country of England to decide. We aren't putting her in a nutty house with insanity. Garfield and John Freeman have to. Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way isn't the responsibility of Garfield and John Freeman." "Yes, she is. We rescued her. We have duties to protect all people, especially sexy ladies with hot bodies." "What is it with Garfield and sexy ladies?" asked John Freeman, growing frustrated. "And why is Garfield suddenly so protective of Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way?" "Because..." Garfield faltered. He had never felt this way, so how could he say it out loud? Especially knowing what would follow. "Because..." echoed John Freeman. "Because I love her!" yelled Garfield, throwing all caution to the wind. The following silence couldn't be called deafening. There wasn't any clever way to describe this particular silence, but it was there, and it broke when John Freeman doubled over laughing. That was what Garfield expected. "Garfield loves Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way!" laughed John Freeman uproariously. "Yes," replied Garfield sincerely. "Is that a problem?" "Yes," said John Freeman. "For one, Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way is incapable of loving anyone. But Garfield doesn't love Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way either. Garfield just wants to have sexual intercourse with Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way." "How dare you! Garfield, come to Garfield's senses. When has Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way shown any signs of affection and caring toward Garfield or John Freeman? You know not of what you are speaking. You're just jealous because I found someone and you're still being hung up on your wife and son." Instantly, John Freeman stopped laughing. Garfield had been known to say inappropriate things from one time to another. But this crossed the line from inappropriate to downright cruel. Garfield knew it, and saw that he couldn't take it back. "John," said Garfield, "I am being so sorry." John Freeman didn't say another word. Instead, he turned around and walked away. Garfield stood in the corridor of the ship, motionless. He knew what he had to do. Ebony sat in the cockpit, listening to Good Charlotte play from the computer. This took her back to Hogwarts instantly. She didn't notice the door behind her open, or Garfield entering. "Ebony?" asked Garfield. No reply. Garfield reached for the computer and turned off the music. Immediately, Ebony returned to the current realm of existence. "What the fuck, Orange Prep?" asked Ebony. "I need to talk to you," said Garfield. "What about?" asked Ebony. She noticed that he didn't have the typical look of superiority or calmness he usually carried. This time, he looked troubled. What's wrong? Asked Ebony. Is it about what happened earlier? Because I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to. It's not that, stated Garfield. It's just some questions for asking. What do you want to know? About your time in Hogwarts. Oh, let me tell you about that, said Ebony excitedly. There were so many preps that I thought I was in the wrong school. But after I met Draco, it got easier. But for some reason, I could never say anything. I was focused on my studies. I know that I had only one chance to prove myself to my parents. They were both Hogwarts students, and I didn't want to let them down. But after my 7 years started, I went to the Forbidden Forest on a dare. A vampire found me and bit me. I was on the verge of death, and then he let me drink from his chest. It tasted gross. But then I fell asleep. Then I woke up and I became a vampire. From then on, I pursued Draco with a passion. We had a relationship like no other, and no one understood it. I wish they did. Then how do you explain this? Asked Garfield. He placed a packet in front of her. She picked it up and read it. Before reaching the halfway point, she put it down and stared intensively at Garfield. Where did you find this? Demanded Ebony. John Freeman found it after he saw you drink my blood, said Garfield. Why are you telling me different things from what this says? These are lies, said Ebony. Are they? Asked Garfield. Then why are there multiple articles within that packet that support this with evidence? It's fake. It's all fake. No, you're the fake. We must drop you off in the United Kingdom. Why? We can't have you on this ship anymore. But no buts! Yelled Garfield. Butts are for grabbing, spanking, shitting, and farting. Get off of the ship. What are you gonna do? Just toss me out? I'll probably break my neck. Vampires don't break necks, they suck on them. You know, you may be tough and strong, but you got the brain of a mandrake. That's it! Thundered Garfield. He grabbed Ebony by the collar and dragged her through the ship. She kicked, punched, and let out a string of obscenities that would make the old man from A Christmas Story blush. He reached for the emergency exit and opened it. Instantly, the alarm went off throughout the ship. Both Garfield and Ebony looked down at the ocean. A cruise liner sailed beneath them. Garfield held Ebony out above the ship. Her hair and clothing blew in the wind. She looked down in utter fright. Happy landing, evil woman, yelled Garfield. Don't do it, Garfield, screamed John Freeman. He had arrived as soon as he heard the alarm and a voice repeatedly saying, Emergency exit door ajar. This is evil woman, said Garfield. I'm sending her to Davy Jones' locker with sinkings. No, said John Freeman. Garfield and John Freeman are better than that. Suppose Garfield throws Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway off of the ship into Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway's death. In that case, Garfield is no better than Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway or any other evil force that Garfield and John Freeman have faced. Garfield hesitated. His strange-speaking friend had a valid point. His oath was never to kill unless the assailant killed or threatened death. Even though Ebony did threaten them, she never followed through, and even went so far as to help them. Her only flaw was being irritating. He gently placed her back onto the deck and closed the emergency exit door. The ship became quiet. He led her back onto the ship. I don't know what the fuck that was all about, said Ebony, but you guys are fucking strange. Garfield and John Freeman are landing the ship, said John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway is on Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway's own. Why? Asked Ebony. What did I do? That is for the country of England to decide, said John Freeman. He left for the cockpit. John Freeman took a moment to stare at Ebony before leaving her alone with her questions. The ship landed in the middle of Piccadilly Circus. All of the residents stopped and stared. The walkway lowered, and Ebony was thrown out onto the ground. The walkway closed before she could return to the vessel. She screamed as the ship left. Giving up, she stared at everyone looking at her. What the fuck are you looking at? Screamed Ebony, lifting her middle finger at them. Haven't you ever seen a gothic vampire before? Ebony? She knew that voice. She turned around and saw him. He hardly changed. His hair was still light, his complexion pale, and his eyes depressed. But he looked older. That was to be expected. but his sight still made her knees turn to jelly. Her skin instantly heated up, and her heartbeat chugged like a runaway locomotive. "Draco?" she ventured a guess. Draco ran to her and looked her up and down. How is this possible? There was no spell for resurrecting the dead. At least, none that he was taught. Yes, there was an elixir of life, but that was gone when Dumbledore and his friend, famed alchemist Nicholas Flamel, destroyed the Philosopher's Stone. There had been other experiments in the resurrection, but none proved successful. So how did she return? The Bobbies arrived to inquire what caused the commotion. "What's the meaning of all this, then?" asked one of the Bobbies. "It's all right, officers," said Draco. "She is my niece. She forgot to take her medication today." "What fucking medication?" yelled Ebony. "Just play along," Draco whispered to her, then said aloud to the Bobbies, "Your special happy pills, remember?" "Are you her legal guardian?" asked the Bobby. "No," said Draco, "but she's spending the weekend with my son and me while her parents are on holiday. Make sure she causes no more fuss and that she continues her medication." "Yes, officer." "All right," said the Bobby to the spectators. "Nothing to see here. Back to your business." The spectators scattered about the area. Draco looked at Ebony. "How did you come back?" he asked. "A hole let me out of hell," said Ebony. "But now I'm here, and we can be together. Forever, like we always talked about." She moved to put her arms around him and kiss him, but Draco backed away. "What?" asked Ebony. "What's wrong?" "We can't be together." "Why not?" "Because I don't love you." "What?" "I'm not attracted to you." "So you're back with Vampire, I take it?" "Vampire? What are you talking about?" "Vampire Potter, deposer who lived." "Oh, Potter." "No, I'm not. I never was." Even he never understood why everyone had to ship him and Harry together. "But you were. You have his tattoo on your arm." "A tattoo on my..." Before he could protest, Ebony grabbed Draco's arm and pulled up his shirt sleeve. There was none if she expected to see skin art. Only pure, unaltered flesh. "But it was there," said Ebony. "It was a black heart with an arrow through it. The word vampire was written in bloody Gothic handwriting." "Ebony," began Draco, "I don't know where you got the idea that we were together, but it's simply not true. Do you even know what I had to go through? Constantly having to tell people the truth? It drove me mad. You drove everyone mad. But you persisted. But..." Bloody tears streamed down Ebony's cheeks. "But Draco, we went to Hogsmeade together. We moshed to Good Charlotte. We had sex. Face of Voldemort. Don't you remember any of that?" "Ebony," said Draco as kindly as he could manage. "Tara, it's time to grow up. Let go." Ebony backed away from Draco, looking him up and down. How could he say these things? How could he be so cruel? And why did he call her Tara? No one except her parents called her that. Then she realized this wasn't the dark, depressed Gothic boy in the Slytherin house that she fell in love with over 20 years ago. She no longer recognized him at all. There was only one explanation for this. She withdrew her wand. "What are you doing, Tara?" asked Draco. "You are under a spell from Lord Voldemort," said Ebony, "and I'm going to get you out of it." "Voldemort is dead," said Draco, "and his Death Eaters went into exile." "Cursius Endis," said Ebony, waving her wand. A black ball shot out and hit Draco. But he didn't move, nor did his expression change. "You still have that wand Ollivander made for you?" asked Draco, smiling. Ebony stared at him once again. She turned her back to him. "Do you need me to take you somewhere?" asked Draco. He knew of a couple of houses that would accept witches like her, those in need of sanctuary. "Leave me alone," said Ebony quietly. Sensing him behind her, she screamed, "Get the fuck away from me!" Draco took his leave. Ebony stood in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, watching everyone around her. Couples kissing and groping, people on odd-looking devices, and kids shuffling with their guardians. All of them were strange to her. Then it hit her. It wasn't them that didn't belong. It was her. She didn't belong at all. I don't have a friend in the world, she said sadly. Maybe I was better off in hell. She walked around the square looking for a gunshot. Maybe I was better off in hell. Those words rang throughout hell like a signal warning of an impending hurricane. The imps got themselves ready to receive their new guest, which happened to be a returning tenant. They missed her. Oh, how they missed her. Missed her torment at wearing the clothes Lucifer assigned for her, and how he colored their world with her language. Most of all, they missed her body. Now and then, when the mood caught them right at the precise moment, they would use her body for whatever their desires called for, even if it meant making a hole, which they did, sometimes in the same place over and over again. One imp loved to make a hole in her heart. Of course, he had to use a little magic to get it beating to maximize his pleasure. Sometimes he would get it to pump faster to snap around his cock. The orgasm was always intense, and the burning semen in her heart chambers was excruciating and always lasted far too long. But it eventually went away. But there was one part of her body they never touched, her womanhood, and everything that followed. All of her reproductive organs were forbidden, except for the fallen angel himself. So it was written in hell, so it was law in hell. But it wasn't just Ebony who was used. Remember, hell was host to many. One of those was a giant dog being penetrated from behind by Lucifer. It was unfortunate to become a sex slave to a giant red demon the size of a professional center for an NBA team. But for Odie, it was worse than anything he had ever come across in his life. He realized Garfield's obsession with lasagna was more tolerable and pleasing than having a 9-inch long demon dick shoved up his rectum for 1,000-odd years. The worst part was he was never offered any ointment for the tears. They may have automatically healed, but it would have been nice to have some quick earthly relief from the pain. Such was the condition of being in hell. The phrase, "maybe I was better off in hell," found its way to the ears of the Prince of Darkness. He stopped thrusting, pulled out, and left Odie to catch his breath and endure the pain. "That is my music," said Lucifer. "She's coming back." He turned to Odie. "You're about to witness what happens when one of our own escapes." Odie's ears perked up. Escapes? He must have been talking about that girl that left him here to experience this unbearable torture. He'd been waiting for this chance, and he would take it. "Mr. Lucifer," said Odie, "permission to speak, O Dark Prince." "Permission granted," said Lucifer. "You won't believe it," said Odie, "but I was put here accidentally." "Really?" Lucifer raised an eyebrow. "According to your file, your crimes included identity theft, invading a public school, forcing someone to choose who to save and who to allow to perish, mass murder, torture, acts of terrorism, imprisoning women, attempting rape, and slavery. Sounds like you're a shoo-in for the fires of hell." "Some of those were out of control and taken out of context," started Odie, but he stopped when he saw Lucifer staring at him. That wouldn't work, he knew, because Lucifer had the ability to look into the heart of an inhabitant to see the truth. He started again. "Okay, I admit, I'm not a good dog, but look. Do you want to spend an eternity ass-fucking me? I offer nothing in the bedroom. As you said, I had to attempt rape to get laid. But what she has to offer in bed, now there is something to consider. I've had her multiple times. What's your point?" "My point is," began Odie, like he was pitching a sale, "what I have to offer you is more valuable than my asshole." "And what is that?" asked Lucifer skeptically. He had heard this phrase multiple times, so he was used to hearing the worst possible deals this side of Trump Tower. Besides, he liked Odie's asshole. It was tight, and always partially prolapsed whenever he pulled out. Still, he had to give him a fair shot. It was the least he could do for his canine fleshlight. "My enemy Garfield," said Odie. "Look at his file and tell me he's no different than I am. Beyond that, he uses a time machine built within his ship to go to various places and periods. Let me get that for you, and you can use it to alter the past to better your future. with me as your right-hand man. I know all of Garfield's techniques and tricks. I know how he thinks. Hell, he doesn't know that I rendered him infertile one night. He's an idiot. You'll trounce him." "And where does the girl fit into it?" asked Lucifer. "However you see fit," said Odie. "Make her your bride. Get her pregnant with more imps. I don't care. It'd be hilarious anyway to watch her brood fuck her in the heart like they talk about doing. But I don't want her. You know who you are?" "What?" "You're a calculating, cold-blooded sociopath. You belonged on that episode of Dr. Phil where you pulled off his mustache and made him eat it. But if you deliver on all these promises, I'll get you a desk next to mine. Then it's a deal?" Odie held out his hand. Lucifer immediately took it. It burned, but Odie didn't mind. They had work to do. Ebony entered the gun shop. The owner, a big guy, stood behind the counter. He saw her and smiled. "How may I help you?" "I want a gun," said Ebony. "Well," he began, "what kind would you like?" "A gun," said Ebony. "One that has a bazillion bullets and is black and gothic. First of all, no firearm holds a bazillion bullets. Secondly, are you looking to buy an air rifle or something else?" "The kin you put in your fucking pocket," said Ebony, irritated. Seriously, was this prep an idiot? A gun was a gun, and that was that. "I'm sorry," said the gun owner. "We don't sell handguns." "Why not?" asked Ebony. "They are illegal," explained the gun store owner. "What kind of fucking country is this?" screamed Ebony. "America lets you buy one." "Well, not here. We value life a little more than they do." "Oh, fuck this," said Ebony, and she exited the store. She continued her way down the street. The earth shook under her feet. Other Britons felt the same thing. They didn't know what to do. It was strange and frightening, and became increasingly so when a fissure formed in the ground and widened. They screamed and ran in different directions. The crack started from across the street and ended just where Ebony stood. She stared, knowing what would emerge. Two figures surfaced from the fires, raging from the fissure in the ground. A giant red monster that looked like a man, and the same creature she saw when she escaped. "Hello, Ebony," said Lucifer. "Are you ready to return to hell?" "Whatever," Ebony shrugged. That stopped Lucifer in his tracks. He wasn't used to that reaction. He loved fear. He thrived on it. It excited him. To see a victim not show any fear took the fun out of the entire process of taking them to hell. "Wait a minute," said Lucifer. "This isn't right." "What are you talking about?" asked Odie. "Take her." "No," said Lucifer. "She needs to be scared." "Who cares? Just take her and be done with it." "Odie, there's a process to all of this." "Man, fuck the process. Look, I'm the Prince of Darkness. I have a way of doing things that works for me." The sound of a ship landing on the ground caught their attention. The walkway lowered, and John Freeman and Garfield ran out, Desert Eagles ready. "Now look," said Odie, pointing. "He's here. Our plan can be put in place." "Odie," said Garfield, "nice to be seeing you again. Now I can be making sure that you're staying in hell where you belong." "Go ahead and kill him!" screamed Odie to Lucifer. "Don't scream at me," said Lucifer. "I get very nervous when you yell. Besides, you haven't seen all the tricks up my sleeve." He snapped his fingers, and a series of imps rushed out of the fires of hell. John Freeman and Garfield, and now Ebony, found themselves cornered by them. John Freeman shot a few, as did Garfield. Ebony pulled out her wand and fired orbs of light at imps around her. A flock dogpiled onto Garfield, but he forced them off with his arms, backhanding a couple into unconsciousness and headbutting others back to hell. He turned and saw Ebony cornered. He ran to her, punching imps into the air, and looked her up and down. "Are you okay?" asked Garfield. "Why do you care?" said Ebony. "Because I love you," said Garfield. Ebony looked at Garfield, shocked. More imps descended upon them. John Freeman pushed a button on his belt. His Harley-Davidson rolled out of the ship automatically. John Freeman jumped onto the seat and rode through the horde, slicing imps with a katana. He popped wheelies and landed on imps' heads. He stopped before Garfield and Ebony. Nice to see Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway again, said John Freeman. He continued through the swarm. Excuse me, said Ebony to Garfield, but why are you here again? She fired an orb at an imp. I love you, repeated Garfield, backhanding an imp. Then why did you throw me out? She asked. Another orb was launched from her wand. I made a mistake, said Garfield, and fired 3 bullets through 3 lines of imps. I should have known better. What changed your mind? Asked Ebony, firing 3 orbs at 3 imps. Well, for starter-uppers, said Garfield, kicking an imp multiple times, then spin-kicking its head clean from its neck. I still owe you that kiss. Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway are outnumbered, screamed John Freeman. Indeed, they were. 3 more imps came out for each defeated one. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony were against the gun shop wall. Garfield, said Ebony. Yes, said Garfield. It was nice for Ebony to refer to him by his real name rather than being called a prep. That belt buckle, said Ebony. Press it. Oh, yes, said Garfield, and he pressed the button on his belt buckle. A jet roared onto the scene, bearing down on the imps. What is that? Asked Lucifer. Oh, shit, sighed Odie. Amico! Yelled a voice through the speaker of a jet. The Guns N' Roses song, Welcome to the Jungle, played. A machine gun lowered from the jet and fired on the imps. The jet hovered above the ground, never stopping the onslaught. Taking the momentum given to them by the mysterious stranger, Garfield burst onto the scene, firing away at the imps and roundhouse kicking them. Ebony fired more orbs from her wand. John Freeman continued slicing away and popping wheelies onto imps. A cloud of dust arose, covering the battlefield. Lucifer and Odie couldn't see what was happening. Ebony shot an orb at an imp, creating a hole in the dust and giving her a view of Lucifer. Ebony remembered full well the multiple times Lucifer raped her. She could remember feeling his sperm slithering inside of her and going through the dehumanizing process of giving birth to the very imps that would, in turn, rape her. How she hated him for that. How she wanted to get back at him, and now she could with a renewed sense of purpose. The only problem was the line of imps blocking her path. She continued firing orbs at the imps, and when one of them fell, she took the opportunity to step onto its head and used the heads of other imps as stepping stones toward Lucifer, all the while firing orbs at imps that tried to stop her. Hey, asshole! She yelled at Lucifer, and with one quick motion, she shot an orb at his exposed penis. The appendage blew off instantly. Lucifer looked down and screamed in pain. Ebony shot 2 more orbs, exploding both of his testicles. He fell onto his knees, clutching his crotch. The imps froze in place. After 3 seconds, they disintegrated and blew away in the wind. The music ceased. The dust cleared. The jet landed and its engine shut off. Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman stood in the fighting stance. Garfield holding his Desert Eagle, John Freeman on his Harley-Davidson, and Ebony crouched on the ground. All of them panted and sweated. The pilot exited the jet and removed his helmet. He was a man with a rugged scar on his left eye. His cloak and hair blew in the wind, created by the jet's engine. Thank you, John Arbuckle, said Garfield. You helped save the day. No problem, good friend, said John Arbuckle. He climbed back into the jet and took off. Care to explain that? Asked Lucifer to Odie. He was still on the ground clutching his disfigured crotch. I keep forgetting about him, said Odie. The deal's off, said Lucifer. You're coming back with me. He dragged Odie down, kicking and screaming. Hey, Odie, said Garfield, pointing his Desert Eagle. This is for rendering me infertile. He shot Odie in the shoulder. The dog screamed in pain as the hole closed up above him. The Britons came back and looked at the 3 strange heroes. They cheered. Draco was among them. He approached Ebony. You were brave, he said. Thank you. You're welcome, said Ebony. Now, I think I can let you go. Really? Asked Draco. Why the change of mind? Change of heart, said Ebony. What I did to you, to Vampire Harry, Bloody Hermione Diop Ron, it was wrong. I should have fought beside you all when it counted most. I could have done more. Now's my chance to do that. Goodbye, Draco. They'll never forget you." She hugged Draco for the last time and turned to her new friends. "Let's go," she said. As they headed to the ship, Draco realized something. "Wait a minute," he said, pointing to Garfield. "I remember you." Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman turned around. "You!" yelled Draco. "Me?" asked Garfield. "Yes, you!" cried Draco. "You shot me!" "What?" asked Ebony, equally shocked. "Yes!" said Draco. "Wizard boy," said Garfield, "I've shot many people. After a while, it all blurs." "John Freeman concurs," said John Freeman. "Garfield has shot many different people. Not even John Freeman can remember it all." "You did!" screamed Draco. "You had a shotgun in your leg, and you bloody shot me in the shoulder. I spent a month in the hospital wing trying to get all of that out. Madame Pomfrey said she'd never seen anything like it." "Oh, yeah," said Garfield, finally remembering. "Now I'm remembering." "Garfield!" screamed Ebony. "We are going to have a talk right now." "I am being in trouble," said Garfield. The ship sailed through space on autopilot. The inhabitants inside went about their duties. John Freeman on the computer writing code, and Garfield and Ebony in the recreational area. This time, Ebony lifted heavier weights, her arms slowly but surely building muscle. "How's it going, sugar butt?" asked Garfield, smiling. "Don't call me that," smirked Ebony, "or I'll render you important." "Very well," said Garfield, "but what's riding through your head like a rampaging buffalo herd?" "You and your metaphors," said Ebony. They had been together on this ship for 3 months since the Piccadilly Circus incident, and since then, Garfield noticed a change in Ebony. "It's just," began Ebony, "I spent my whole life wanting one man. Never spent Tim on myself. Never found out who I am. Never found out who truly was right for me." "Well," said Garfield, "you can always begin here." It always got on her nerves when Garfield hit on her like that, and it always gave Ebony a supreme thrill to be the cock-block. But, after 3 months spent saving so many lives across the universe, "Do you want to stick your thingy in my you-know-what here?" asked Ebony, "or shall we retire to a more private area?" "Follow me, my Gothic queen," said Garfield, "and I'll show you why I'm king in the bedroom." Of course, it was a bedroom. Garfield had it especially designed for moments like this. It had a heart-shaped bed with a red comforter and his and hers pillows. A candelabra stood directly across from the foot of the bed, still showing evidence of many nights of lovings. There was a radio from the 1990s sitting close by the bed. Garfield and Ebony entered. Garfield led her to the bed, allowing her to sit down. He walked to the radio and grabbed a CD entitled Best Love Songs from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Ebony saw it. "Best love songs from the 70s, 80s, and 90s?" asked Ebony. "I never knew a CD like that existed." "There is no other in existence," said Garfield. "I had it especially made for lovings like this." "You make CDs?" asked Ebony. "Sometimes." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "You never asked." "Would you make me one for me?" "Sure, sweet thing. What would you like to be having on it? Can it be Gothic songs?" "Yes." "MCR, Good Charlotte?" "Yes." "Oh, I'm a Satan." "Get it, 'cause I'm Gothic." "You're hotter now." "I know, baby cakes." "Put your man thingy and my lady thingy right now." "Get ready, 'cause I'm going to be riding you like a wild stallion of the Cimarron." Garfield pressed the radio's play button and the music began. He walked to the wax-encrusted candelabra and lit the candles. He turned down the lights. The mood was set. Garfield took off his shirt. Ebony looked him up and down. She reached out and touched his body. They kissed. Ebony took off her top, exposing her flat chest. Garfield licked her up and down. She shivered. Garfield took off his pants, and his love anaconda sprang free. Before this moment, Garfield decided to go to a space doctor to get his tubes reattached. It was an expensive surgery, but he made it through. He developed a limp, but fought through it despite much pain and suffering. He knew it was worth it because he knew whom he wanted to receive his seed. Ebony's eyes widened at the sight of Garfield's manhood. She took off her dress and was completely naked. She spread her strong legs apart, exposing her freshly shaven womanhood. Garfield climbed onto the bed and hovered over Ebony. He thrust into her. She gasped loudly. He kept pushing, slowly at first and then faster and faster. Ebony yelped with every thrust. It wasn't her first time, and she was devastated that her first time wasn't with Draco, like she wanted it to be. Yes, she was raped multiple times by Lucifer and gave birth to imps that liked to fuck her chest. However, her mind returned to Draco, and she realized that the one she loved was never Draco. He was a crush, an infatuation from her teenage years. The one she loved was right here, inside of her right now. That caused an orgasm that rocked through her body like an earthquake. Garfield himself experienced many orgasms in his life. Some of them were terrible, others were pretty good. But this was the best. He felt every drop of his climax leave his testicles and enter her cervix. They grew still, shaking and staring at each other. They kissed. "I love you," said Ebony. "I love you," said Garfield. The monitor on the cockpit showed the post-coital romance between Garfield and Ebony. Magic. It was pure magic, and it was all witnessed by John Freeman. He sat in the pilot's seat, his pants around his ankles. He had a look of pure ecstasy on his face. "Nicely done, John Freeman's wife," said John Freeman, "and nicely done, Garfield and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway." A woman emerged from between his legs, wiping some residue from the side of her mouth. Is John Freeman sure that Garfield and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway don't know that John Freeman and John Freeman's wife are watching? "Don't worry," John Freeman assured her. "As long as Garfield and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway never ask, John Freeman and John Freeman's wife will never tell." The end. So that's it. We made it.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay! Oishimos! We did it!
This entire series completely wrapped up. So now what am I going to do?
It's not a bad question, Bert.
I have an idea. But you're going to have to wait until the next time.
Damn it.
Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you so much for keeping up with me this entire time. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Share it with everybody you know. Subscribe today. I upload every Saturday, or at least try to. Hit the notification bell to get notified of more content. Like the Facebook, Tumblr, TikTok, and Instagram pages. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe and healthy. And remember, it's chaos. Be kind.